Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, let me give you a second to. Okay. I've got to where I turn the, whether it be heat or air, up a little bit so it runs before Bible study, and then I can pretty much crank it back down to normal, and hopefully it doesn't run that much. It's not that big of an issue, but it does sometimes. Well, you hear the rumble in the background, which, like I say, it's not a big issue. It's not really much different than what you hear in person, but anyway, sometimes when you're sitting in a, listening to a screen, it's a little different because you can't see things as well. So it's good to be here. Some of us had a fun night last night again. I tell you, it seems like our congregation here has a growing legacy on people who have won either Mr. or Miss BHS, and we continued that last night. And so, it's good to see. Also, I gave Carly a hard time last night because the last two winners she has done the makeup for. So she's going to be very prized for next year, obviously, as that continues the streak. So be sure to congratulate Megan today. And so that was very exciting. I know some men was really excited that that's who she got to crown. And so it was a neat night. We're going to continue Revelation. By the way, in the back I have CDs, actually DVDs of previous lessons from the book of Revelation. What we have is the lessons that we have are the first 9 lessons. I've got them on 3 DVDs. And so as we get enough, there's no need to waste space on DVDs. So basically we can put about 3 lessons on a DVD. So we have actually been through 10 lessons of Revelation. This will be the 11th. And so as we get 12, we'll add another DVD. But those are for your enjoyment. Those are for your benefit. And so if you want, please have at it. If we run out, I can make more, and that is no issue. God is in control. We got into this just a little bit last week, and I wanted to also deal with this today. God is in control, and we talked about all the troubles that we have in this world. And, I've done this lesson many times, probably 4 or 5 times in a congregation setting throughout my preaching career. And every time I've done it, especially since I've had used PowerPoint, I've had different pictures on this slide because I don't care what year, what decade, there's always troubles going on in this world. And a lot of times we think the troubles going on now are the worst troubles there's ever been, and yet my guess is that's probably not the case. And so we have a little perspective. Probably the difference is, now our troubles are not only on news. That kind of started in the Vietnam era, where every night you saw reports of the war. But they are on 24/7 now on TV. Not only are they on TV 24/7, they're on the internet. In fact, you can get updates on your phone, and you can get instant access. And so the troubles we have now, we see them, every single second. Well, good morning. Yeah. Every single second of the day. And so as a result, so the troubles that we do have, which haven't changed that much as far as there being troubles, it's just that everybody's aware of them more. I don't really think that's necessarily been a a good thing. And so, as I have often said, and I've heard others say it as well, remove yourself from the news, remove yourself from things like that, because you'll be much more content. Because what we do know, what we do understand, is our own community, our own neighborhoods, and for the most part, there are no troubles of that magnitude there. In fact, I would dare say the overwhelming, not just majority, but a very small fraction of the U.S. is where there are troubles on an ongoing nature. And so as a result, it distorts what our lives are like. But because we see it, it becomes a trouble to us. Anxiety raises and other things. And so we need something to take care of it. And so I kind of mentioned those superheroes are very popular now. We need a superhero. Well, I want to tell you, we've got one that's greater than any superhero, any comic book that's ever been. God is in control, and He is indeed the great avenger. We've been through this, but I wanted to kind of refresh a little bit. We see the opening, we start in Revelation 6, the opening of the 7 seals. And of course, in Revelation 5, we see that only the lamb, the slain lamb that was still standing, was worthy to open the seals. And each of the first 4 seals, what we're going to see, are going to be announced by different cherubim. These are these fanciful creatures that one has the face of a man, one has the face of an ox, one has the face of a lion, and one has the face of an eagle. And so each one, different one, is going to announce the opening of the seals. And the first has a voice like thunder. And we mentioned this last week, that thunder has, it really draws your attention. You hear a lightning and thunderclap, and it gets your attention no matter where you are, especially when they're close by, and everyone pays attention. So the voices of these cherubim, they had this same distinction. When you heard it, you paid attention. And so we see in basically the bulk of our lesson today is going to deal with what has been labeled as the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And the truth of the matter is, yes, that can be said, because Revelation, in essence, the word is simply apocalypsis. And it is a revealing revelation. And so in that sense it is true, but what people have come to think and believe that this represents is the end of the world. Now, there is no indication, in fact, we're going to see that that's not what really this is about. But, make no mistake, that these things must take place before the end can come. And what we're going to see over and over again in the book of Revelation is the fact that everything that needs to come to pass for Jesus to return has come to pass. The only thing that's remaining now is for Jesus to come again one day. And so it is indeed true that Jesus is coming soon. He's going to come quickly, and there's nothing left as far as prophecy that will prevent Him from coming. Now, it could still be another millennial, 2 millennial years before He returns again. But that doesn't change the fact that the prophecies, the things that needed to come about, have came about. And so we read this quickly. I'm going to actually skip. We read this last week, and hopefully if you weren't there, you can look through it. We're going to go through a lot of these scriptures again, though. Where John says in Revelation 6, many times he uses this word, harao. And it means I saw, to see, to come into view without particular intention. So once again, these visions, remember John has seen visions. And so, much like you'd see on a TV screen, you might say, he's starting to see these events take place. He says, I looked, or to look, to intentionally view. It was something that he paid attention to. Maybe you're scrolling through on your Facebook feed and you see all of a sudden that, someone shared a cat video that says it's just the funniest thing you've ever seen. It says, oh, okay, well, I got to check that out. And then you check it out, Well, this was of much more gravity than that. And we see that he had to look. He intentionally looked when he saw what was coming. I watched to intentionally view an activity in motion. So as this scene plays out, John is intently watching. We see some other words, and it's good to go over these words because it helps us understand really to grasp the full understanding of John's revelation here. And didomi, 4 times in Revelation 6, means to give. The writers are given their power. Now, we need to understand this, and because, the title of the lesson of really what I've given Revelation 6 is God is in control. God is the great avenger. These events could only take place when God gave them the authority or power to do so. And so we see this in a deed, that these events were allowed by God. It's a concept that I think those in the Old Testament understood better, because in the Old Testament, they understood that God allowed, God was in control, and even when someone hardened their heart, it was that God allowed them to harden their hearts. And so sometimes the phraseology could even be, God hardened their hearts, because He allowed the events to take place that ultimately would harden their hearts. But man always has a choice. But here the point is that these writers did not have this power on their own. They did not have this authority on their own. They were given by God. In 1 Chronicles chapter 29, verses 11 through 12, it says, Yours, O Lord, is the greatness, the power and the glory, the victory and the majesty, for all that is in heaven and in earth is yours. Yours is the kingdom, O Lord, and you are exalted as head over all. Both riches and honor come from you, and you reign over all. In your hand is power and might, and your hand it is to make great and to give strength to all. Remember, we've looked at the word that's translated usually Almighty in the book of Revelation, and Pantocrator, and basically it means hand and all. God has the whole world, everything in His hands. He's indeed Almighty. And so we see the little lamb opens the first seal. Now, the writings on both sides of this scroll, and it's important what's on this scroll that we need to read. We need to be able to understand. We're not getting to that yet, because all these seals got to be removed before we get to see what's on these scrolls. But the first seal is removed, and with opening of each seal, you see a little bit glimpse of things that will come to pass. And the first horse he sees is a white horse. Now, white is one of those terms that we'll see over and over and over again in the book of Revelation. And it symbolizes victory here. So it is a victory horse. And the rider had a bow. By the way, not everyone was good. You can think. I know, I forget how many years ago, but there was a piracy incident where some pirates somewhere off the coast of Africa had seized a vessel, a cargo ship, and needless to say, it was a real precarious instance, and they sent some Navy SEALs out there, and there was actually a Navy SEAL that, a sniper that struck down the bad guys. He did it on a boat, and I remember seeing some information about that and talk about the training, the skill level, because on a boat, boats constantly are going with a wave, and so is the other boat, and so you got to think about it. Then you've got the wind and other things. So the person, the sniper that had the shot on the boat, his boat is moving. There's wind. There's other elements. The other boat is moving, and yet he skillfully had the shot. Something very similar back in the day was people that could actually shoot a bow while riding a horse. Now, movies make things like this look easy, but it doesn't work that way. A lot of times even, shooting from a moving car. By the way, it's usually not very accurate. I was told a story by Charlie Slater, who was an elder at the Sallisaw Church of Christ. One of the charter members, which Charlie was, but also one of the charter members of the congregation in Sallisaw, was the mother of the infamous Pretty Boy Floyd. And Charlie Slater played baseball in younger days with Pretty Boy Floyd. And anyway, there was many incidents back in the day, you could imagine. Police forces weren't as well trained as they are today. And so Pretty Boy Floyd would go in to rob a bank, and I forget what bank it was near Sallisaw area that Pretty Boy Floyd robbed. And he got the money, and the police saw him, and so they began chasing. And of course, they had their little big pistols and everything. They just kind of shooting his car. And so Pretty Boy Floyd picks out of his car and has his Tommy gun and starts shooting with a machine gun fashion, which is a little bit better, because, and needless to say, the police decided that was enough. They'd stopped and they turned around and went back home and just reported it because they were way overmatched. But one of the things, in fact, we'll talk about this later with the coming of the Roman Empire failing at some point in time, there were people that were able to skillfully do this, to ride a horse and shoot an arrow. And by the way, this rider is likely not Christ. Now, Christ is going to be seen as riding a white horse in Revelation 19. In fact, we'll talk about this in our sermon today. But this is not Christ. This is one of the four horsemen, and he is riding this horse and he has this arrow. He was conquering and to conquer. Now, there's different ways to conquer. One of the ways to conquer is, in fact, the way is to overcome the world with Christianity. And I think this is always the best way. In fact, for all the troubles in our world, what they really need is Jesus. And we need to always remember that the blood of Christ is sufficient for anyone, no matter what they've done in the past, no matter what they're presently doing. And there is indeed power in the gospel. It is God's dynamite. Revelation 11:15 says, "Then the seventh angel blew his trumpet, and there were loud voices in heaven. The kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever." And of course, we know that he's reigning now, and he must reign while there is still an earth. And so indeed, Christ has overcome the world. Christ has overcome sin and death. And we too may be part of that. By the way, I'm going to give you a little glimpse into the end of the book of Revelation. At the very end, I've heard numerous preachers do this independently. And if you want to, go right ahead. At the very end, the last verse of the book of Revelation, they write, "We win." Because that is the ultimate story of Revelation. That is the ultimate conclusion, is that Christians, those in Christ, win. Now, it's up to us to choose sides. Isn't that great? God loves us enough, he allows us to choose sides. But in this case, wouldn't it be nice, back in the day, if you were, on sporting teams, instead of someone picking you, remember when they used to do that? And it always felt bad if you was the last person picked. But instead of someone picking you, what if you got to choose what team you was on? And what if you already knew this team will win? In fact, it's not even going to be close. Well, which team would you choose to be on? In essence, that's what our lives are like. We get to choose which team we want to be on. One side's already won, but God still allows us to choose. Well, the little lamb opens the second seal. Remember, once again, we got to always remind this, only the lamb can open these seals. And so the lamb opens the second seal. And it is a red horse, fiery red, symbolizing bloodshed. Great sword, that of a Roman soldier. And so you see some of the armies with the bow. In fact, I think it was the Parthians that was really skilled bowmen, and they could shoot from a horse. And one of the few armies that the Romans actually feared. But here we see the Roman army here symbolized with this great sword, that of a Roman soldier. Given power to take away peace away and to kill. Now, bear in mind, these things are things that will take place. And indeed, Christianity did spread like nothing else. It did conquer the world, and yet we see that there were still other problems that would take place. The third seal is a black horse. Black. For the most part, for weddings for funerals. For funerals, people still wear black to symbolize mourning or sorrow. And by the way, remember they went through this little thing about, the price of oil and other things. It is a contrived famine about how much bread was going for because oil and wine were fine. If it was a real famine, even these things would have been disrupted. And a denarius, anytime you read this, is simply a day's wage. The fourth lamb, or the fourth seal that the lamb opens, is pale yellowish green, the color of death. And the rider, death, and Hades. And this is one that I think the movies, they always focus on this one probably the most. But a yellowish green color. How many of y'all grew up watching, let's see, yeah, I don't have many youngsters in here, except for Kenneth. Maybe he saw the reruns. Ever seen the Munsters? And of course, in black and white, you can't tell, but then they did a movie or two that was colorized in color. And remember that greenish color that they were? But you know, a pale color. I know back in the day, people had open heart surgery, especially at the beginning of it. You would go see someone that just had open heart surgery, and they basically looked like they had died. I mean, they had no color in their skin at all. It was just pale. My dad, I know when he had his open heart surgery, you know, we was somewhat concerned about that, how we see him. We'd even warned others, but he actually had this this approach where a very skilled surgeon did his, kind of equate it to hot wiring. Basically, they never put him on a heart-lung machine while he was having his bypass. They just rewired him as his heart was still pumping. So he looked the same as he did when he had the surgery. But still, when they have to do the heart-lung, they still look very pale. And so that's why this rider. Now, that would be scary, would it not? Someone that has the look of being dead, riding a horse. And he's given the power to kill. Kill by sword, hunger, death, pestilence, and wild beast. Bear in mind, once again, Christ is still reigning through all this. But yet these are things that would have to take place. Now, all this we've got to see, and as we get past the four horsemen, we've got to see ties from the book of Revelation to the Old Testament and to other things. And so now we're going to see in Revelation 6, 9 through 11, the opening of the fifth seal. And there it says, when he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the witness they had borne. They cried out with a loud voice, O sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long before you will judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? Then they were each given a white robe and told to rest a little while longer, until the number of their fellow servants and their brothers should be complete, who were to be killed as they themselves had been. In some ways, this had to be a little troubling to those of the first century. They had begun to have severe hardship. They were impoverished because they could not participate in some of the things that those that were making the money in the day could. And they had little. Not only that, they were being persecuted, and some of them were even imprisoned, and many of those were even put to death for their simple beliefs. And those that had died, there's a scene here where they cry out to God, how long? How long will this go on? God answers them, yet a little while, and there will be others. God had already said, and Jesus had already revealed in the first 3 chapters that there'd be persecution. But Jesus assured them, be faithful even to the point of death, and you'll receive the crown of life. And so we see these things that are going to be panning out. The point and purpose to those of the first century was, yes, indeed, you're going to go through persecutions, but your victory is assured. But these persecutions won't last forever. And so this type of persecution would someday end, but it would go on for a while. And so they were under the brazen altar, souls have been slain. So the brazen altar, of course, that was where the sacrifices were offered. Leviticus 4:30 it says, and the priest shall take some of its blood with his finger and put it on the horns, the altar of the burnt offering, and pour out all the rest of its blood on the base of the altar. Of course, Jesus is our sacrifice lamb, and He's allowed us to have access to God. And so under the altar of the slain souls, slain for the word of God for their testimony, maturia, testimony, or witness given, related to the word martys, which we get our English word martyr. It simply means a witness. And literally we're talking about the witnesses of a martyr. That's those that are saying, how long, Lord? How long? Hebrews 11:4 tells us, though, that by faith Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain, through which he was commended as righteous. God commended him by accepting his gifts, and through his faith, though he died, he still speaks. Abel was indeed the first righteous martyr of the world. And indeed, Abel still spoke because of the things he did. And so these are people that their legacies was that they remained faithful even till death. They cry out, how long? The word there, ekrazin, in the Greek literally means to croak like a raven. Now, if you've ever been near a raven or a bird like that, they are very, very loud. So they were crying out loudly. Oh Lord, despotes. We get our word despot, but here, basically that word, all it ever means is supreme sovereign ruler. Usually it's meant as a bad thing when it's earthly people, but here of God it's not. God is our judge, and He will avenge our blood. This is not a new concept. Jesus even speaks about it in Leviticus 18:7-8, where He says, and will not God give justice to His elect, who cry to them day and night? Would delay long over them? I tell you, He will give justice to them speedily. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man will He find faith on earth. God will take care of it, but in His own time. They cried out to God. God heard their cries. And God simply said, wait a little while longer. In the meantime, because you have done well, you will receive white victory robes. The glory of heaven is far greater than any troubles on earth we'll see. And those in heaven, they were still concerned about those left behind. We see a constant there that indeed there are things that we will retain when we go to heaven. I want to know how long? Just a little while longer. In the meantime, you have a great victory. Who's able to stand against God? And that's really what it comes down to, because when God does avenge His elect, none will be able to stand. You see, all are subject to God. Revelation 6:15, then the kings of the earth and the great ones and the generals and the rich and the powerful and everyone slave and free hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains. Now, I don't believe this is dealing with final judgment, although I do believe sometimes there's some ebb and flow of time in the book of Revelation. But the reason I don't believe this deals with final judgment is because it's only the sixth seal. We've not even covered the seven seals, and after this we're going to see other things as well. We're going to see trumpets and other things, and so we're not to the final judgment yet. The point is, though, when God does avenge, no one can stand, even when He takes care of things on this earth. You see, Rome would end, did it not? Rome, this bad entity that was persecuting the majority of the Christians at this time, it ended. God ended it. You can say, oh, it ended because of this, because of that, because of that. But God foretold that it would come to an end, and indeed, the events were transpired that brought it to an end. And indeed, there is no hiding place from God. Jeremiah 23:23-24, am I a God at hand, declares the Lord, and not a God far away? Can a man hide himself in secret places so that I cannot see him, declares the Lord? Do I not feel heaven and earth, declares the Lord. And of course, we see the end of the matter. God's going to bring every secret thing. The bottom line is this. God will rectify. And God does take care of things. God is not just God over heaven, but He is God over earth as well. And so surely He can orchestrate things that takes care of matters that He truly uses in justice. And so, what troubles you today? And the question we'll all ask is, how long must we endure? And whatever it is that you're going through, bear in mind that as you cry out to God, the sovereign ruler says, wait only a little while longer. You see, our lives are short on this earth. Even those who live to be a century old and older, that is but a fleeting time in comparison to eternity. Wait just a little while longer. Revelation 2:10, do not fear what you're about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested, and for 10 days you will have tribulation. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. That's Revelation 6. Next week, and I got to where I wanted to. Next week, we're going to start Revelation 7. And one thing I know, that's not Jack's in that picture there. That's his one kryptonite, I guess. But anyway, are you washed? Boys love to get in mud. And, they get muddy. So, are you washed is really the theme of the lesson of Revelation 7. So, come back next week. And in a couple of weeks, we'll have another DVD if you want to pick them up. And if you need more, just let me know. Appreciate everyone being here.